At what point does someone give up on coffee and start smoking Greg? I'm joking, but that's where I'm at. I keep telling myself that this extra shot of espresso will fix me, and it never does. The emptiness I felt after the possession was over hasn't fully subsided. It's difficult to describe, but at first, it felt like I'd lost something, though I was not entirely sure what it was. While Romy was passed out in my bed, I examined myself, trying to figure out what was missing. Without meaning to, the girls helped me diagnose the issue. Siri was slapping Connie in the face while the goat stared at me helplessly, silently pleading for me to save her from this vicious bully. Before being burnt out, my heart used to swell with adoration anytime the two animals did absolutely anything. I still felt that love warming my chest, but it was reduced to a muted flicker. Like a bud trying desperately to bloom only to stagnate as nothing more than a partially formed flower. I rescued Connie by picking her up, much to Siri's disappointment. I kissed the goat's head as I wondered if I'd ever feel like a whole person ever again. I should have been grieving, but even that was cut down to a mere ache in my throat. I focused on it, trying to scratch the surface, yet the edge of this anguish stayed dull. Even feeling terrible would be better than being a husk. Was that all that I was now? A shell? I hugged my little goat closer. When Romy didn't wake up after 12 hours, the only glimmer of anxiety that my numbed heart could manage drove me to check on him. I tapped on the pile of blankets until they shifted to uncover one eye gleaming from the cocoon. I'm alive, Romy rasped, then sighed before adding, against my better judgment. I nodded, settling down next to him. Yeah, me too. The blanket cocoon absorbed me. At this point, it hadn't even been one full day since he'd been exorcised. Romy's skin still had a deathly gray cast to it. The dark circles around his eyes made their shine even more brilliant than usual. He'd taken his shirt off at some point before his hibernation, revealing that the necrotic tissue surrounding his old bullet wound had spread a bit further, covering two of his ribs, rotten tendrils reaching for his sternum. Maybe I should have been more delicate, but with how my emotions were dulled, it was difficult to gauge how to communicate properly. Granted, my communication skills weren't anything to brag about to begin with. Would you have died if you hadn't taken me over? It took him a bit to respond. Something like that. Not able to die, not able to survive on my own. After another brief pause, he added, I suppose you regret it. I quickly shook my head. I don't regret it at all. You needed me. I couldn't let that happen to you. It was true. As much as I felt like a stranger with my own skin after the fact, I knew I wouldn't have forgiven myself if I'd let him fade away like that. He pulled me closer, burying his face into the crook of my neck. Without thinking, my head and heart a mess, I admitted that the events of the previous night had been my fault, that I'd led the PPE guy right to us. I was scared of you when I first saw you, I confessed. I didn't know what else to do, and it just kept going. Romy kissed my neck lightly as he whispered, I know. Before I could ask how, he continued, It was in your head yesterday. You're not mad? His shoulder rose in a small shrug. Nope. I don't appreciate that you hid it from me, but there's nothing that can be done about that, no. When I asked if he wanted me to stop posting, he said he didn't care, just as long as I kept his real name and where we were a secret. A perfectly reasonable request. All in all, that part of the conversation went far better than I'd ever thought it would. Speaking of the PPE guy, I inquired about what that jackass had done to the hoofed djinn. Romy tiredly answered, The goal is his servant now. Self-proclaimed sorcerers think that capturing a djinn makes them hot shit. I hate that this was the first thing that I thought of, but me. Kinda like Pokemon? Romy raised his head, letting me see that he was frowning. After a long exhalation, he said, I know I'm going to regret asking this, but what are you talking about? Oh no, time to ramble. Well, they go after djinn to use them, particularly your elemental abilities, right? This PPE guy went for the hoof gin, and I think he wants to try to go for you at some point. Because, gotta catch 'em all. Romy shook his head at me, chuckling at me. You're such an idiot, you know that? Smiling like the insufferable dork that I am, I added. But you're more like an Entei, something legendary. Definitely not a Jigglypuff. I have no idea what either of those are, so I'll just take your word for it. So, there you go. My emotions may be broken, but my terrible sense of humor is still well intact. Oddly enough, that gave me a sliver of hope that I hadn't lost myself entirely. That for better, or for worse, despite everything, I was still me. I didn't remember dozing off, but when I came to, the light was golden outside. Groggily, I tried to figure out if it was sunrise or sunset, as well as what year it was. Romy was sleeping peacefully next to me, Siri curled up in a ball between us. Not having the energy to cook, but hungry, I opted to run to the convenience store to get something, taking care not to disturb either of them. Siri opened an eye, but was back to dreaming of harassing rodents in no time. Romy didn't react at all. Before anybody asks, no, I still haven't gotten my PT Cruiser's back window fixed. With all that's been happening, it's become an afterthought. Over time, I've gotten used to the sound of plastic flapping in the wind. If you keep your standards low for life, you can go nowhere but up. With how drained I felt, the drive went by in a blur. I simply remember arriving. As I pulled into a parking spot, I felt my phone buzz. Take a guess who it was. The Reddit message said, I didn't mean for things to get so messed up. I genuinely am trying to help. You'll see that in time. Jackass. I decided right then that the best thing I could do is block him. He'd already used my posts against me once before. He didn't need any more opportunities to do it again. With that taken care of, I went inside to see what cheap convenience store food awaited me. As I wondered what a pizza dog was, I had the sensation of someone's intense gaze upon my back. Anya looked surprised when I turned around. You're still you. Who else would I be? She curtly explained. You smell so much like him that I thought you were taken over. What would it matter to you if I was? I questioned flatly. I just don't like surprises, especially when they're in the form of Jin masquerading as someone as non-threatening as you. I was tired, not in the mood for her nonsense at all. Without giving her any warning, I took a chance on the pizza dogs and marched to the checkout. Naturally, this irritated her, and she demanded to know where I was going. I didn't bother answering. The poor cashier was pretending like she didn't see me, pointedly ignoring the woman glowering at my back. What was Anya gonna do about it? Try to bite me again? Follow me home? I was too exhausted to care. Let her try, and get burned. She tailed me out the door, hissing so that nobody would overhear. Was the collapse in the animal facility because of you? It had to have been. Against my better judgment, I finally snapped. Who cares? Anya's hand lashed out to encircle my upper arm, stopping me right outside my PT Cruiser. Her hand didn't get cooked. She spoke through clenched teeth in a clipped tone, as if what she was saying caused her physical agony. I need something that I'm pretty sure that only you can get for me. I'll owe you, alright? Okay, that was unexpected. From what I could tell, things like her and Romy took debts seriously, especially blood debts. However, Anya had been deceptive the first time I'd accepted an offer from her. She'd used my ignorance of how such deals work against me. I knew a bit more than I did before, but I wasn't an expert. Far from it. My curiosity probably will kill me someday. After deliberating for a bit, I furrowed my brow at her and uttered, No tricks. Tell me exactly what you want and why you want it, or I'm gone. Fine, she agreed. Before continuing, she averted her eyes from me, her jaw clenched. My ex-husband has been hiding behind offerings. I'd like you to remove them for me. I was about to ask her to clarify when I remembered something from my churro research that made my scorched heart sink a bit. I didn't bring it up before in my previous overview of them simply because it wasn't important at the time, so I'll share it with you now. According to Southeast Asian folktales, a woman may transform into a churl if she suffers what is considered to be a cruel or unjust death. This includes neglect or mistreatment by the men in their lives. A woman could also transform if she died during childbirth or menstruating, as it was believed that a woman was impure during these times. Which is profoundly fucked up. In short, it was safe to assume that Anya's marriage hadn't been a happy one. "Why do you want me?" I questioned, trying to sound a bit less harsh. My nerves may have been fried, but that didn't mean I had to turn into a complete dick. "Don't you hate me?" With a rude snort, she replied, "I don't care enough about you to hate you. Contempt is a better word." "Yeah, use whatever word you want. Why me?" She shook her head almost imperceptibly, as if she couldn't believe that the following words were about to leave her mouth. "I'll admit it. Luring me to distract that trigger-happy redneck was clever. Annoying, but clever. I'll need that same type of resourcefulness to deal with my ex-husband. That, and you're so baby girl that he wouldn't see you as a threat." That definitely didn't sound promising. Anya's gaze was back on me. "So, will you accept?" I rubbed my eyes from under my glasses. On one hand, this wasn't my business. I didn't need to be involved in Anya's nonsense. Then I thought about how weak Romy was right then, and consequently, how I felt like an empty void had opened up in my chest. What if neither of us got better? What if this was just who I was now? Carefully, I asked, "What kind of favors are you capable of performing?" That seemed to pique her interest. "Tell me what you have in mind, and I'll answer truthfully if it's doable or not." Knowing that he'd be safe in the house, I told her that Romy had been exorcised. Even if she wanted to take advantage of his vulnerability, the wish would keep her out. Anya pursed her lips thoughtfully before replying. "Your boyfriend will recover on his own over time. I could help, but I doubt he'd let me." Her eyes scanned me for a moment before she added, "The same goes for you." Well, that shot my next inquiry in the face. She must have noticed I was at a loss, because then she asked, "Who performed the exorcism?" When I told her that I didn't know, a big smile appeared on her face. "Would you like to find out?" Well, there it was. Something helpful. Her smile grew. Anya held her hand out, offering to drive so I could eat my pizza dogs in peace. If you were curious about what a pizza dog is like, it wasn't the best thing I'd ever have in my mouth, though it was oddly satisfying. It wasn't the dinner I wanted, but rather it was the dinner I deserved. The PT Cruiser of meals. After recovering from pizza dog purgatory, I finally thought to ask if the offering she needed me to take was another goat. Maybe Connie could have a sister or brother after this. Anya informed me that the goat her ex-husband had was most likely already dead, sacrificed to appease her. Oh, never mind then. She slowed, eventually pulling off to the side of the back road we were on. Already? When I got in the talismans from Matthew's door, I'd had time to prepare. I didn't have that luxury this time. Anya led me through the woods until we eventually came to a cabin. What looked to be a skinned deer hung from a post on the other side of the cabin. I crept forward, getting closer to the house, wondering why I was dumb enough to agree to this. Maybe I really just can't help myself. It was hard to see, but it looked like there was something with coarse gray fur on the front porch. Goat's fur? Glancing around warily, I approached the porch. The doorknob rattled. Fuck! There was nowhere to hide as Anya's ex-husband opened the door, his brow furrowed at me. I hadn't expected him to be so old. He was a big guy, but judging by his white hair and the deep lines on his face, he had to be in his 60s. For context, Anya appeared to be in her early 20s. Was this age difference present back when she was human? Or had she been a churl for that long? May I help you? Anya's ex-husband asked me gruffly, sizing me up. I thought fast, smiling helplessly. Yeah, sorry, my car broke down and I can't get any service out here. I've just been wandering around hoping to run into someone and, here you are. The old man smiled back. I didn't like the way he looked at me at all. His voice kinder than his eyes, he opened the door wider. Lucky you found me, huh? I got a landline. Can't trust cell phones out here. I didn't want to go in, but I stepped through the door, trying to keep up the pretense of being an innocent, lost traveler. Thanks, I feigned gratitude, thinking up another tall tale to sprinkle in. My wife is going to be worried. Ex-husband nodded at me, not giving me much room to squeeze past him, making me move closer to his body than I was comfortable with. I swear that he stood up even taller as if to emphasize his size. What was odd was that even though my anxiety was muted, my body reacted the same way as it would have under normal circumstances. My mouth felt dry and sweat prickled at my underarms. Ex-husband shut the door. I pretended not to hear the click that resulted from him turning the deadbolt. So, you have a phone, you said? I chirped, keeping a smile plastered onto my face. He grunted. End table, behind you. Sure enough, there was an old, corded rotary phone sitting on the end table. The old man chuckled. You ever see one of those before, son? Him calling me son made my skin crawl, the word sounding oily as it touched my ears. Yeah, it's just been a while, I answered, reaching for it. My plan was to call my own phone, which was on silent, and pretend like I was talking to a towing company. Afterwards, I'd have to find some way to get the offering off of his porch. As I took it off of the receiver, ex-husband abruptly asked me what my name was. I gave him a fake one. While I turned the wheel to dial like I was in the 1950s, he asked for my age. Weird. Why would he want to know that? Again, I acted like everything was fine as I called my phone and performed a pantomime of speaking to a tow truck driver. After I got off of my fake phone call, Anya's ex-husband commented, You know, it's funny. I don't see you wearing a ring. I thought quickly, my eyes going wide as I glanced at my left hand, then frantically slapped my pockets. Shit! I just had it! Oh God, Laura's gonna kill me! This increasingly uncomfortable conversation was interrupted by the sounds of something falling in another room. Ex-husband dismissively said it was his cat. There was another thud. Then another. He told me he'd be right back. This was my chance. I waited until the old man left, hearing a door open and close somewhere in the cabin. Once I thought it was a good time, I snuck over to turn the deadbolt, then slowly opened the door, trying to stay quiet. It creaked. Across the house, I heard a door slam, followed by his heaving footsteps hurrying towards me. Shit. I ran to the porch, located the offering. A gray goat not much bigger than Connie lying on its side, flies buzzing around the red line along its throat. I grabbed it, trying not to notice that maggots wriggled in the poor animal's slit neck. One got on my hand, its slimy skin making me flinch. I ended up dropping the goat in the woods behind the cabin just as I heard Anya's ex-husband race out of the front door in pursuit. He moved faster than I would have expected for someone his age. Maybe he wasn't as old as he looked. After I abandoned the goat's body, I went in the general direction where I thought the PT Cruiser was, adrenaline warming my lower back. Wait, what was that on the ground? I skidded to a stop. Bear traps. Why the fuck did he have bear traps? Who was he? Leather snapped around my neck, cutting off my air painfully as I was roughly dragged backwards. As I grabbed at it, struggling, the belt got warmer. Ex-husband reached up to wrap his arm around my waist only to flinch away as the wish did its job. I collapsed to the ground, choking, gasping, tears involuntarily blurring my vision. So, you're like her, aren't you? Ex-husband growled. Impulsively, I flailed, grabbing at his ankle. The smell of burning flesh assaulted my nostrils. Ex-husband swore and kicked me off of him, then jammed his heel between my ribs, knocking the wind from me again. I put my hands up to protect my face, waiting for another blow. That was when I heard him swear again, the assault coming to an abrupt halt. Anya stood by me, her back turned towards me as she faced her ex-husband. She looked stiff, frozen as he wrapped the belt around his fist. I coughed again, rubbing at the sore spot his belt had left on my throat. It was going to bruise later. The sounds of me trying to breathe seemed to snap her out of whatever spell she'd been under as she took a step towards him. I'd expected her to have something snarky to say, but she was uncharacteristically quiet. I tried to circle her, limping on the leg I'd grabbed. Carefully, I got up, warily looking around to make sure I didn't stumble into a bear trap as I leaned against a tree, still trying to get my lungs to work again. Anya's ex-husband snapped the belt at her like a whip, the buckle striking her teeth. Anya's head turned to the side from the impact. I saw the exact moment that something snapped within her. Her teeth clenched, burying them like a rabid animal as she charged him. As quick as he had been earlier, his burnt ankle slowed him as Anya threw him to the ground. She was on top of him. Flesh tore, then he was the one on the ground gasping for air. Anya bit into his neck again and again, his limbs twitching involuntarily with each snap of her teeth. She raised her head to spit his blood into his face. Suddenly, she pulled away, scrambling back from the old man. Wheezing. He wheezed, his fingers twitching. He was still alive. "Just fucking die!" she screamed, her voice shrill with panic. Anya dove on him again, grabbing his chin, roughly pulling his head to the side with a horrific crack. Instantly, I felt the pizza dogs coming back up again as I saw the angle that her ex-husband's head was bent at. I doubled over, dry heaving, but somehow managed to keep everything down. Wiping saliva from the corner of my mouth, I slowly straightened up, avoiding looking at the body. Anya couldn't tear her eyes away from him, backing away slowly as if afraid that he'd get back up. "Is he dead?" she asked me. She sounded like she was crying. My voice was hoarse from being choked, so I simply said, "Yeah." Wait, the thudding I'd heard in the house earlier. Just the cat, he'd said. I don't think he'd put these bear traps out in case a cat escaped. Eyes on the ground, I ambled back to the cabin. I heard Anya crunching through the overgrowth behind me, sniffling lightly. Once back inside, I retraced the path he'd taken earlier, finding that one of the doors had a padlock on the outside. Anya seized it, breaking the metal effortlessly in her fist. She wiped her eyes furiously, sniffing again as she pushed the door open. The smell. The girl whose mouth and wrists were wrapped in duct tape had to have been in that room for weeks, possibly even months. A filthy bucket sat in the corner of the room. She couldn't have been older than 15. The girl was unconscious, her swollen, bruised eyes shut while her cheek was buried in the stained mattress. I quickly looked away from her, shaking as I took in the unreal, hellish nature of her situation. Anya didn't look at me as she spoke. "Lab rat, I swear to you that I'll help you find who you're looking for. Just, please, let me take care of her first." Yeah, of course." Not sure what to do with myself, I turned to go, but stopped. Could I really just leave them like this? Before I could say anything, Anya told me. "You've helped enough. Let me take it from here. It's going to be hard for her to trust anyone, especially a man." All I could think of to do in my stunned state was nod. Before I left, Anya stopped me again. "All burns heal with time and care. The one you've endured is no different. Watch the sunrise. Hold the ones you love close. Do what brings you peace, and in time, you'll feel like you again." I paused, trying to gather my thoughts. I thanked her, awkwardly telling her that I'd see her at work the next day before I departed. When I got home, I immediately embraced Romy. At first, he was confused and concerned, noticing the ring of bruises on my neck instantly. I assured him that the person who did it was dead, then informed him of my misadventure with Anya. After I was done, he pulled back a bit, still holding me. He looked less dead than he had that afternoon, some of the color returning to his cheeks, the shadows under his eyes lightening. "Sounds like I've missed quite a bit," he commented, gently tilting my chin up with his fingertips to examine the marks on my neck closer. I shrugged. Just another day in the life of someone who can't mind his own damn business. At least this time it was for something good. At least that girl Anya and I found is free.